We think about this day, and I think this is probably the only holiday that has not been co-opted in our society. You know, Christmas has been taken over by Santa Claus, Easter by the Easter Bunny. But it's just hard to steal Thanksgiving from that. I guess this is one of my favorite holidays, is just being together, being able to share our blessings and our thanks for all that God has done in our lives. When we were young children in school, we were reminded about the Pilgrims. We were reminded about that first Thanksgiving. For those of you that know history, it was back after the Battle of Gettysburg and the Civil War in 1863 that President Abraham Lincoln set aside this day as a day to give thanks and praise for God's blessing and goodness. And I thought to myself, wow, what an amazing thing to have a celebration, a national celebration set up after a huge battle where more than 50,000 people lost their lives over a 3-day period. We've got a full day of worship today, and like I said, you really are the conclusion to this day. And I hope you will be thinking long and hard about what you might want to say today. But I wanted us to kind of prime the pump just for a couple of minutes today to have us look at a beautiful story that is only found in the New Testament book of Luke. I wanted to preach out of Luke today because next Sunday, I want to invite you to join me in an Advent Bible reading journey. Next Sunday, it's hard to believe, next Sunday is December 1st. And it begins our 4-week journey in Advent as we prepare for Christmas. Next Sunday, December 1st, here's what I want us all to do. I want us to really make Luke, the book of Luke, our focus for this season of Advent. There are 24 chapters in the book of Luke. If you will read one chapter a day from December 1st to December 24th, you will have read the entire story of Jesus Christ in the days of Advent. And then when we come to Christmas Day, you're really going to be able to celebrate a Merry Christmas. It's a simple plan. One chapter a day, starting December 1st. So let's do that together. But this morning it's Thanksgiving. So we're going to give you just a little bit of an idea of what you're going to be reading on the 17th day of December. Take your Bibles, turn with me to Luke chapter 17. We're going to look at a story that I'm sure we have all heard before, but it's a beautiful, powerful story. Luke 17, verses 11 through 19. You ready, church? Word? Hey, good. Good. All right, here we go. Luke 17, verses 11 through 19. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, and he thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Leprosy is a tough disease, but back in Jesus' day, it was a really bad one. Because these 10 lepers were forsaken, hopeless men. They had leprosy. There was no cure for it back then. Leprosy was death, but it was death a little bit at a time. You would lose a finger, an ear, a leg, or an arm. It was a terrible way to die. Nobody knew back then how it started, and so they thought it was terribly contagious. So you had this terrible disease, but then you were also driven from your homes and you couldn't live in your town anymore. The reason I wanted us to look at this passage for just a couple of minutes today is with the story of these 10 lepers, Luke emphasizes the rarity of a thankful spirit. Luke is the only gospel writer who tells this story. 10 lepers are healed, only one really turns around and gives thanks to God. And it seems in a lot of ways like, even in our day, especially it seems like this year, Thanksgiving, kindness, love, charity, all of that stuff. It just seems like it's rarely expressed and rarely given. And I think that's why this day is so important for us as a church family today. I heard the story this week of a senior citizen who was at the post office, shook an awful lot, couldn't really write very well, was trying to mail a postcard to a family friend. So he asked another man in the post office to help him write the card. He found a younger guy and he said, "Hey, could you help me send this postcard to my relative?" So the man said, "Sure." And the senior citizen began to say, "Here's what I want you to say on the card." And the man filled out the address, did everything the senior asked him to do. And then the man said, "Is there anything else I can do for you? Is there any other thing I can do to help you?" And this old senior citizen said, "Yeah, there's one more thing. Can you add a PS at the bottom of the postcard and say, 'Please excuse the sloppy handwriting'?" How often do we hear people express sincere gratitude? Not very often. How often do we really think about what we have instead of what we don't have? And this is such a weird week in the United States of America. On Thursday, we gather as families and friends and we celebrate around tables and we think about everything we have been blessed with. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning on the very next day, we rush around to go stand in lines to buy things that we don't need. It's a strange, strange day. How often do you hear people express sincere gratitude? Probably not often, but today you have an opportunity to do that in just a few moments. Thanksgiving comes from the same root word as the word think. So to think about life accurately is to thank God continually in the middle of this life. Colossians 4:2 tells us, "Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful." That's not an accident. Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. They go together. And that's a good reminder for all of us today. What I want to say to us today as we get ready to share our blessings is that God is really pleased when we express our gratitude. And I want you to think for a bit about what's happening here with these 10 lepers. We're not really sure the makeup of the group, but it kind of gives you the impression that maybe there was 9 Jews that were together and 1 Samaritan. And as the lepers were going to the temple, as the lepers were walking to the temple, they were healed. And you think about what's happening here. It was such a risk for these folks to even think about going back to Jesus because we don't understand the society back then, but it was the priests. It wasn't the doctors, but it was the priests who decided if people could return to society, if they were really cleansed and clean and whole again. And if the priest gave you a clean bill of health, then you could go back to your normal life. So these 10 are walking to the temple. They're thinking about what's going on. They realize, they look down, hey, I got all my toes again. My ears are back. Everything's there. We're healed. But it's the priest who makes sure that I can return. It's the priest who validates the healing. If I go back and return, what happens? Will I lose my healing before the priest tells me I'm okay? Can I really risk going back? And this one man, this one Samaritan says, yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell Jesus thank you. And I've thought this week, what made this one turn around and give praise to Jesus? We live in a world where it's kind of like we go by the mob, we go by the herd mentality. Can you imagine this one guy saying to the rest of the other 9, hey, I'm going back. I imagine there was probably some pressure. Hey, stay with us. We're going to the priest. You can't go back to Jesus yet. What made him turn around? What made him go back to Jesus? And to be not just grateful for what had happened, but thankful. Being grateful is an emotion, but being thankful is an action. Thankfulness really is acting on your gratefulness. And I don't know if you caught that when we read that again in chapter 17 of Luke. But can you imagine being those lepers who have no hope in this life at all? And they look to Jesus and they say, Jesus, Master, have pity on me. It changes everything. There's a real message here that we need to take to heart, especially in the crazy society in which we live today. The one who has been healed much, the one who has been changed much, the one who has been transformed much, they are the ones who praises much. And you know, one of the things that strikes me again with a story that I have read many times is the 10 had no ability to heal themselves and make themselves whole. Their only hope was Jesus Christ. I wish Luke would have shared the name of that one thankful leper with us. And Jesus healed him, and it moved him from gratefulness to thankfulness. And his only response was to go back and bless the Lord for his blessing upon their lives. You know, I was thinking this week, maybe it's time for us here in the Apple Valley Church of the Nazarene to change the way we greet each other. Aren't we tired of just coming up to somebody and saying, "How are you?" Such a boring greeting because we know what the answer is always going to be unless somebody's really honest. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm great. How are you? Oh, couldn't be better. How are you? Blessed. You know the answers. But what if we walked up to each other and said, "What are you thankful for today? What are you thankful for today?" I heard of a Christian counselor who was trying to help a man in his office who was very depressed and was having a very, very difficult time. All this man could talk about and think about was everything that was going on in his life that was wrong. He was anxious. He was unhappy. So the counselor, he got a crazy idea. He had a whiteboard in his office like this. He went over to the whiteboard and he did this. Little red dot. Counselor went back to his client and he said, "What do you see?" Client said, "I see a red dot." And the counselor said, "I think that's your problem. There's so much more white space on the board than a little red dot. Yet that's all you see." It's the same in your life. What are the good things that you're missing because you're so focused on one little red dot in the midst of everything else? Hey, Apple Valley Church of Nazarene, this hasn't been an easy year for a lot of us, has it? It's been a lot of loss, a lot of grief, a lot of change. But a thankful heart can help us to see more than just a dot. And this morning, my prayer for us is that we will move from gratefulness to thankfulness for all that God has done and for all that God is doing. And my prayer is that this will be a church that will always be a church that turns around and says, we're going to follow after Jesus. We're going to serve him. We're going to do what God has called us to do. We're going to say thank you.